Neither a crab nor a horse, horseshoe crabs adamantly defy expectations, using legs as teeth, tails as eyes, and having only 4 species, but remaining integral to coastal food webs. Welcome to the Insect Spotlight Project, a channel dedicated to shining a light on insects, spiders, and any other creepy crawlies that get left out of the ecologic spotlight. Today, we are talking about the order Xiphosura, better known as the horseshoe crabs. Despite the name, they are not crustaceans. Rather, they are an order within Chelicerata, a subphylum of arthropods that also contains the better-known arachnids. Now, if you're a regular of this channel, you've likely heard me talk about how arachnid phylogeny, or evolutionary history, is quite messy. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but chelicerate phylogeny as a whole is very messy. Originally, we thought the extant or living chelicerates were neatly divided into 3 main groups: the horseshoe crabs, the sea spiders, and the arachnids. However, with the advent of genetic analysis, it's seeming like the Xiphosura are nested within the arachnids, being a possible sister group to the Ricynulii, the hooded tick spiders. This has created waves in the arachnid community, supporting the idea that arachnids are not monophyletic, or derived from one unique common ancestor, and also that they seem to have colonized land multiple times, rather than one terrestrialization event. And since Xiphosura and Arachnida are 2 of those 3 major groups of chelicerates we mentioned, I think it's fair to say that our understanding of chelicerate evolutionary history is a bit tumultuous. But let's dial back into specifically the Xiphosura, because regardless of where they fall in the family tree, Xiphosura is believed to be monophyletic, a true grouping all dating back to one unique common ancestor. At least the living ones are. There are 88 described species in the Xiphosura, but 84 of these are long extinct, so there are only 4 living species today. They are also often labeled living fossils due to their relatively unchanged morphology when compared to their fossilized brethren. This is impressive, considering a lot of these fossils date back as far as the Ordovician period, around 450 million years ago. Nowadays, you can find 3 of the 4 species of Xiphosura over in the Indo-Pacific, and 1 species along the Atlantic coast of North America. Though you shouldn't have too much trouble recognizing a horseshoe crab, let's still go over some of the unique characteristics that are found in this peculiar group. Like many of the arachnids we've discussed, the horseshoe crabs have 2 clearly defined body regions: the prosoma and the opisthosoma. Dorsally, horseshoe crabs have a tank-like appearance, moving close to the ground with a smooth domed outer shell and dragging a long tail-like structure, their telson. The telson is actually their namesake as well. Xiphos is Greek for sword, and ora means tail, so Xiphosura roughly translates to sword tail. And no, the telson doesn't have a stinger or anything. It's just helpful for things like flipping themselves over if they end up on their back. Towards the sides of the prosoma, you'll find their lateral eyes. These eyes are made up of many individual units called ommatidia, making them compound eyes similar to that you'd find in the insects. However, this is not their only pair of eyes. Far from it. They also have a pair of simple eyes for light detection toward the front of their dorsum called their median ocelli, as well as a third median rudimentary eye between them. They've also got a rudimentary eye by each of their lateral compound eyes, as well as simple eyes on their venter and even photoreceptors on their telson. So most of these are for light detection. The lateral compound eyes are their complex image-forming ones. And if you flip Xiphosura over, their morphology only gets weirder. First, let's tackle the issue of what's going on with their legs. Something I encourage you to do is to throw out the black and white thinking of leg versus not leg, and think of it more as just different specialized appendages. Arthropod ancestors had a ton of appendages along their segmented bodies, so it's just a matter of how these have changed or diminished over time through evolution. So for example, the first pair of pincer-like appendages you see towards the front or anterior of the horseshoe crabs are their chelicerae. So these are used for manipulating food and are homologous to those structures where the fangs are found in the spiders, or you can really see the resemblance in the chelicerae of the scorpions. Homologous just means they're derived from the same ancestral structure. The next pair of appendages are their pedipalps. Homologous, of course, to the pedipalps in the spiders or pedipalps in the scorpions, But in Xiphosura, they don't look very different from the next three pairs of appendages, their functional or walking legs. But all four pairs of these appendages are helpful in locomotion, with claws to help grab food or mates. The last pair of what you might call legs are their pusher legs. These are also helpful in locomotion, helping to push the Xiphosurans across the sand. The plate-like appendages on the Opisthossoma are their book gills. These are important for gas exchange, and the juveniles will also use them to paddle through the water. Now you may be wondering where their mouth is. Well, it's at the center of all those claw-like legs. And if that sounds horrific to you, brace yourself. If you look toward the base of the appendages surrounding the mouth, you'll notice they're heavily spined. We call these spined bases their gnathobases, and they articulate as the legs move to grind up food and push it toward the mouth. Delightful. But anyway, the horseshoe crab life cycle can be roughly broken up into three main stages: egg, juvenile, and adult. However, it's not uncommon to hear people refer to those freshly hatched first instar horseshoe crabs as larvae, or trilobite larvae. They're called trilobite larvae not because of any real relationship to the Cambrian crawlies, but because these first instar larvae look a little bit like trilobites. First instar means they've hatched from the egg, but they have not yet molted. Second instar means they've molted once. Third instar means they've molted twice. You get the idea. Horseshoe crab eggs are laid in the sand and hatch out during high tide so the larvae can swim off to their marine homes. There they will feed on small aquatic invertebrates throughout their life cycle. They are benthic, meaning they like to hang out by the seafloor, feeding on things like bivalves, worms, and maybe some small crustaceans. Overall, horseshoe crabs take their time to reach maturity, like a decade. Sometimes it can even be more like 14 years. But eventually, they reach maturity as adult horseshoe crabs. But this is not the end of their story, by any means. Xiphosurans can continue to live and reproduce for over a decade after reaching maturity. Horseshoe crab mating occurs in the spring and summer, where they'll come to shore to lay their eggs in the sand or mud. Males will link up to females using their specialized pedipalps, but despite how it looks, there's no direct sperm transfer taking place. No actual mating is happening. Yet. Rather, this is just the male's attempt to lay claim to the female and position himself in the best spot possible to fertilize her eggs externally. We call this position amplexus. So once the female digs a hole and lays a mass of these tiny round eggs, the male will release sperm over top to fertilize as much of the eggs as fate will allow. Indo-Pacific horseshoe crabs are mostly monogamous, with the female laying thousands of eggs across multiple clusters for the clingy male to fertilize. The Atlantic horseshoe crabs are a bit of a different story. Atlantic horseshoe crabs will spawn in mass numbers across the coast. They will quite literally coat the beaches in some areas. Although they do lock up in amplexus, it's hard to guarantee monogamy in all this chaos. And the males know this. So males will follow pairs linked in amplexus to hopefully sneak some of their own genetic material into the egg mass. The sex ratio is highly skewed in Atlantic horseshoe crabs, with males greatly outnumbering females, so it's not like these stragglers can just run off and find a female of their own. Some of these Xiphosuran beach takeovers number in the millions, with Delaware having some of the largest spawning events across the coast, and with each female laying anywhere from 15,000 to 80,000 eggs across the breeding season. That is a lot of buried treasure for hungry beach predators. Plenty of organisms will happily snack upon a breakfast of horseshoe crab eggs, but the predators that get the most attention are the various tidal birds that rely on this readily available nutrient-dense feast. Avian migration takes up a lot of energy, and it just so happens that many of these birds are migrating in the spring. So Delaware Bay and these other Xiphosuran hotspots have become perfect stopover sites for hungry migrating birds to refuel. Up to 1 million birds will stop over in the Delaware Bay alone as they migrate north to breed. Mama horseshoe crabs will do their best to bury their eggs out of reach, but between the tides, the chaotic fight for paternity, and the digging of other mama horseshoe crabs, plenty of eggs end up surfacing into avian striking distance. Even the adults are not safe. Older, flipped-over Xiphosurans who struggle to right themselves may be capitalized on by a hungry gull. But through all this chaos, many eggs are bound to survive, and after a few weeks, out hatch the larvae, continuing the cycle. Xiphosurans do not negatively impact us. The only real negative effect they may have is when they get caught up in our trawling nets as bycatch, but they don't want that to happen either, and I personally am not a big fan of trawling anyway, so... On the contrary, horseshoe crabs are incredibly important both ecologically and societally. We already talked about the critical role they play in shorebird migration, but let's talk about the other major reason we care so much about them as a society: their blood. Horseshoe crabs have a blue blood that uses a copper base rather than an iron base, but we do not drain their blood because it looks pretty. The blood component we are after is a clotting agent called Limulus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL. Limulus being the Atlantic horseshoe crab genus and the most commonly harvested species, though Tachypleus is also sometimes harvested, in which the extract is called TAL. What makes these clotting agents so significant is that they're incredibly sensitive to bacterial endotoxins, meaning they are great indicators of these toxic compounds in things like vaccines or insulin. They're literal lifesavers. But we don't need to kill them to drain their blood, so we harvest them, take some blood, and release them. A little more sci-fi horror, sure, but more sustainable. But they don't all survive. Around 15 to 30% of bled individuals die from this process, and there seem to be some behavioral changes that can result in additional mortality or decreased fitness, overall creating sublethal effects that can be hard to quantify. And this is important because horseshoe crab conservation is dicey. It used to be even worse. We used to gather them up en masse and grind them up for fertilizer and animal feed. In the Delaware Bay, the population was believed to be around 4 million in the late 1800s and dropped to around 100,000 in the 1960s. While horseshoe crab numbers are not near as bad as they were, we're not out of the woods yet. Many Atlantic horseshoe crab populations are doing great, but others are still in decline. And given that a big part of their survival strategy relies on their large numbers, any continuous decline in a population is a little spooky. But we can't just blame bleeding as the sole cause of this decline, of course. Habitat loss and pollution can have massive impacts on horseshoe crab populations. And this isn't just the Atlantic species either. Indo-Pacific horseshoe crabs are negatively impacted by the same things. One species, Tachypleus tridentatus, is considered globally endangered, having experienced consistent population decline and habitat loss. But overall, I'm quite hopeful for Xiphosura. New research is always being done into ways to reduce mortality after bleeding, and a synthetic alternative to LAL called RFC is becoming more and more commonplace. One of the most important parts of Xiphosura conservation is population monitoring, and while this can be tricky for a seafloor-dwelling organism, there are actually ways you can be directly involved in keeping tabs on these little oddballs. Delaware Bay takes volunteers for their spawning surveys, and it can be an awesome opportunity to see this natural wonder up close and personal. I'll leave a link in the description for anyone interested. But anyway, thank y'all for listening. And if you like the content, please remember to like and subscribe to keep up to date with future videos. And if you have any fun facts that I missed, or any personal horseshoe crab experiences, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. Peace, y'all.